A very good afternoon to all of you. Welcome to Verdictum. Today in our In Conversation series, we are honored to have with us Additional Solicitor General of India, Mr. Vikramjit Banerjee. Welcome to Verdictum, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Banerjee is a graduate of National Law School of India, Bangalore, after completing his LLM from Chevening Scholar. From the University of Leicester in 2000, he joined NUJS Kolkata as a faculty member and later practiced at Calcutta High Court for 8 years. He then moved his practice to Supreme Court in 2015 and was appointed as Advocate General of Nagaland. In 2016, he was designated as a senior advocate by the Guwahati High Court, and Mr. Banerjee was appointed as Additional Solicitor General of India in the year 2018. So, sir, we'll directly start with the questions. So, my first question is, previously joining this legal profession was not a very favored option as people pursued a law degree as a last resort. When I was a law student, I'm from a state university, so I have been told कि जो कुछ नहीं करता वो law करता है. पहले ऐसा बोला जाता था. So, how was your experience as a law student, especially in National Law School in, I say, the pre-CLAT era?
Yes, it was very interesting. I think, as I've always mentioned, when I joined law school was known to very few people. So when I joined law school, people were surprised actually that I went to law school. So I would be, because it was in Bangalore, I would be confronted with questions like, how much of capitation fee did you pay to get in? So people were actually not aware of this. I joined because a senior of mine, who's now also a senior advocate of the Supreme Court, and who was a student in the school where I studied, Nikhil Nair, joined the law school. And I sort of followed him because I've always wanted to study law. I think from the time I was in class 10, I wanted to study law. And then National Law School was the first sort of national law college or university which was being set up. And so to me, it was an obvious choice. The exams were obviously not as difficult as it is today. But the profile, and we were just discussing with, in fact, Nikhil today, that it's was also quite elitist. So all the students at that point of time, in the pre-CLAT era, were largely out of like 5 top schools from every city. And you knew them, mostly people knew each other. Or even if you didn't know each other, it was like 3 degrees of separation. I know someone who knew someone else from that city. So that is how it was. Great. The exposure was fantastic. It was extremely cosmopolitan. It exposed me to the rest of India, exposed me to a lot of interesting ideas. And it gave me a lot of the skills which I today use.
That's wonderful. You also worked as a faculty member at NUJS before starting your practice. So how was that experience? Like, is that something you were passionate about?
Well, I love teaching. I loved teaching, and I still love it. Very interestingly, I joined NUJS is because, after I came back from my master's in law, I did not want to practice law. I thought I had enough of litigation. I didn't want to practice. So I wanted to go into social work. Actually, my inclination was to work with Banavasi Kalyan Ashram at that point of time. And I did get in touch with people who said that I could. But then at that point of time, I met with Dr. Menon, Madhav Menon, who led both National Law School and NUJS. And he had shifted as the Vice Chancellor of NUJS at that point of time. So he said, okay, you go and do social work. But before that, you try to change the minds of the younger generation and influence them. You give that a shot. We are also doing social work. We are also trying to change society. So Dr. Menon, as anyone will tell you, whoever knew him, was extremely persuasive. He could, famously convince people of anything which he wanted to do. So I joined NUJS. It was very interesting. But I realized after a point of time that Indian academia is too restrictive, and I would rather do litigation where I had a lot more freedom to do what I want to do.
As Nagaland's Advocate General, you have also represented the government and still you're doing it now. So what problems have you encountered as a government representative and how do you deal with this work pressure?
There were two different challenges. At the present moment, I represent the government as a government lawyer. There's pressure of work, there's a pressure of the burden of a large number of briefs, a large number of complicated matters, of sensitive matters. But the job of the Advocate General was very different. There was sensitiveness, there was a lot of political undercurrents, it was absolutely a different kind of profile and a different kind of job. And a lot of it was advising government behind the scenes as to how to proceed. And there, as the Advocate General, your word actually mattered. Your opinion was what was going to decide the course of action. So you were responsible for whatever you were doing. You were clearly responsible. Now, well, pressure there is. As I tell people, I don't know of any other world. So work pressure, I think I'm used to. That's how it is. That's part of the job that I'm used to. But of course, as I was discussing with some of my friends, and I always say that resulted in, of course, compromising with a little bit of your, or a large part of your family time. So, but that's as they say, that's how the cookie crumbles. So if you've got this job, which is a very coveted job, both the Advocate General of Nagaland and the job of the Judicial Solicitor General of India are very coveted jobs. Then once you put yourself up for that job, then you have to bear the consequences. So that's it. So there is no regrets.
Everything has its pros and cons, especially in the field of law. Your personal life is more like of a dream.
As I said, that's how it is.
Agreed. So litigation has always been perceived as a very difficult path, as we discussed, like this pressure and all. For the first generation lawyers specifically, if we talk, that the path for the first generation lawyers is very difficult. And given today that lawyers are more interested into corporate roles or other avenues. So what are your views on it? And what are those 5 do's and don'ts which you suggest to any student who consider litigation?
Yeah, I'm not, I've been through it. I've been through it twice. I've been through it in Kolkata, where as a first generation lawyer, I practiced for 6 years. And I've been through it in Delhi, because then again, I sort of been practicing for 2007, so 15 years now. So I started from scratch at both places. It's difficult for first generation. You don't have the infrastructure to deal with litigation. And litigation has a long gestation period. So it's tough. It's also tough because you don't have name recognition. So to build up the reputation takes a long time. But what are 2 or 3 things which I think is key to building that reputation? Is number one, the court and the profession should get, profession means colleagues at the bar, people who brief you should get the impression that you are, that you work hard at your work, that you sort of try your level best to be on top of the brief and the law on which you are arguing, that you should have decent presentation skills. You should be able to make your point clear in court. 3, you should have very good interpersonal skills. You know, how you deal with your colleagues, how you deal with your clients, how you deal with the court. these are absolutely interpersonal skills. These are people skills. You should have people skills. And last but not the least, you need tons of luck. Anyone who tells you that you don't need luck in the profession is, I was going to use a strong word, but let me put it in parliamentary language, is not being very truthful.
And what are those mistakes which usually law students must not do in the initial stage of their career?
I think the initial, there are two things. Number one, some of us slack off. You know, they give slack to their profession. They don't pay too much attention. They think that, you know, no one will notice. People do notice. And it's a reputation which you don't want to have. And but most importantly, another thing which happens is people get frustrated because it seems like for a long period of time you don't see light at the end of the tunnel. I can give you numerous instances in my life where I thought that, you know, I've had enough. I want out. And I want to leave. But it didn't happen. You know, I have a lot of stories about a lot of people who inspired me to stay, continue, hang on there. And but as a result, you know, I know for a fact that it's an extremely frustrating time, especially the first 2-3 years when you join a new place, a new board. And when you measure yourself against your colleagues, some maybe your friends whom you grew up with, and you see what they have achieved, so you tend to compare yourselves with them, and you realize they may be streets ahead. So it's very easy to get frustrated. And I think the biggest issue in the profession is comparing yourself with the achievements of your friends. That's a recipe for disaster. You may be a successful lawyer, but you always compare yourself with your friends. And they'll have the new shiny car, they will have the fantastic house, and you will always think that, you know, what's wrong with me? So the best way, I realize, is to be happy and do your best, what you can do in the profession. Yeah.
Absolutely true. So talking about more law students and legal education, nowadays national law universities are no less than other premier institution in the country. And law nowadays is a profession which has been considered popularly among the students. But it has been observed that the quality of legal education is not uniform in every law college. So do you advocate a uniform legal education policy, or there should be some uniformity in the syllabus or the quality that should be provided to every law college?
See, I realize the argument of having, you know, localized, institutionalized syllabi. I realize that there's a valid thing. If it gives you flexibility, it gives you adaptability, it also gives you the means to localize to a place. And law is, to a great extent, a localized set of rules. So I understand, appreciate that. But I think for the purposes, general purposes of education, at least amongst the national law school, there should be some, at least a skeleton of a common syllabi on the core subjects which you are teaching. Of course, every law school, like every engineering, is known for certain subjects where it's going to be specializing in certain subjects. So, you know, where you can develop and go on your own. But on certain core subjects, there should be some sort of a common syllabi. That's one part of it. But I think the most saddest part of today's legal education system is the difference between the national law schools and I'm not saying all law schools, because there are still some very good law schools like the Delhi University, Bombay University, Chennai University, and even Kolkata to that extent. So there are some great law colleges, I'm not saying no, but most people operating out of the system are not that good. In fact, there are some law colleges which are standard is much to be looked at. So I think, and their legal education is nearly non-existent. So I think this sort of a differentiation which happens is not good for the profession. Because at the end of the day, these other non-national law school law colleges are what makes up the majority of today's profession. So I think the state concentrates all its resources on these national law schools and pampers them, which is good, which you produced wonderful students. But I think it's important that the amount of resource which it sends to national law schools should also be sent to law colleges, which in fact produce people who serve the community. And I'm not saying national law school people don't serve the community, but I think that the contribution of national law school to the community is not proportional to the image and the importance which it enjoys. I think I've tried to put it as politically correctly as possible.
No, that's really true, because I've been to a state university and I have seen that difference when I pursued this professional journalism. So this difference I have realized, that how much the confidence then the student lacks when it goes to the field. When they see students from different university, they have that mindset, oh, he's a national student. So that confidence, that inferiority complex, because of the lack of infrastructure, but obviously that they don't have that much infrastructure to know about things which national university easily provide as a part of a curriculum to their students. So this is somewhat a something I can very relate to.
That's what my take on it is this. And we need to possibly look at, and something which National Law School has now started off, possibly a 3-year courses and more diversion of resources away from national law schools by the government, because the state has an obligation. Private law colleges can have national law schools, they can generate their own resources, which they're equipped to do, can get funding from wherever, corporate funding, because that's the nature of the funding way national law schools proceed. But the state should concentrate more on ensuring increased, better infrastructure for law colleges outside the national school system.
Absolutely. So coming to your journey as an advocate, so in your entire career, is there any particular case or particular instance which has been a turning point, and which case you think is the most difficult case in your career, where you have felt
I don't think any cases are more difficult than each other. Everything is contextualized. So, but I think the most important case, which I think is not the turning point, but I think which I changed, I think was extremely important to me, is the Ram Janmabhoomi matter. I grew up in the 90s. I'm a 90s college graduate. To me, the entire movement was fundamental in the way I viewed the world. I came from one background, and it's the movement which changed the way I perceived who I was, how I interpreted the world according to me. And to be able to participate in that same litigation, and be involved in the entire process, and be a part of the arguments at the High Court, the final arguments in the High Court, and then final arguments in the Supreme Court, and being able to be a key person in the entire process was, at one level, was emotional is one part of it, but I think was incredibly important. The rest, of course, there's some great matters, some not so good matters. But being part of the Ram Janmabhoomi litigation was an incredible process, and I think completely revelatory, and changed me also.
So if we sum up or if I ask Mr. Banerjee to sum up his incredible experience in few words, so how would you do it? And what was the major lesson you have learned in this entire journey of yours?
Patience and humility. According to me, are the keywords which I had in my journey. Other people have different experiences. But to me, I think patience. If you, in the worst of times, you have to hold on to your patience, to your faith that in the end everything will work out. And I think the other is that, people in this profession, especially in the legal profession, take themselves, there's a tendency to take themselves very seriously. And I always say this, that it's important for us to take our work very seriously, but not to take ourselves very seriously. I don't take myself seriously at all. And that's my advice to everyone. Take your work very, very seriously. But yeah, I don't take myself seriously. I don't think I'm an important person. This is my journey. I had a good time, bad time. I had my time in it. Sometimes it's been frustrating. Sometimes it's been enlightening. Sometimes it's been exhilarating. But I've enjoyed the journey as of now. I don't know what's going to happen later. But till now, I've enjoyed the journey. And I've always advised people, if you don't enjoy the journey, get out and do something else. If you want to play football, play football. If you want to play, you want to do theater, do theater. If you want to do business, do business. If you want to do whatever. But you have to enjoy the journey. And that's extremely important.
Very true. Like I totally can agree to this part, that it's very important to enjoy your job, specifically if you're into this legal profession, because it helps you to grow every day. It teaches you every day something. It's very important to understand this journey and enjoy and make the max out of it. So my next question is, what improvements do you believe are required in the Indian judicial system, and what issues must be addressed in order to strengthen the system? Because we always have been mocked. Those people who are laymen who don't understand the system, they mock us for the pendency. They mock us for being delayed in the courts, for delayed justice. So what is actually required to strengthen this system?
I'll make a statement which is my personal. I don't represent the government when I say this. I say this because I have a background as an academic, and when I come to it, sometimes I put on my academic hat and these are my personal views completely. I think the biggest problem of the system is, which Mahatma Gandhi actually identified in Hind Swaraj and later, is that the system itself is colonial. And you can never ensure that justice reaches every person if you have this system. This system is concentrated on basic urban areas, because that is the nature of colonial rule, whereby the wealth of the entire country was concentrated first in smaller towns, then in larger towns, then taken abroad. Now it's not taken abroad, it's in India, so our towns and cities have become centers of power, accumulation of wealth at the cost of the country. So if we have to have a just legal system which reaches everybody, we have to decolonize it. And so the solution is to decentralize it. Decentralize means possibly turning the system as we know it, this hierarchical system as we know it, which goes from smaller courts to a single apex court, possibly on its head. And maybe the system of Panchayati Raj, which Maji spoke about, is extremely relevant. I may sound like a crackpot, but I worked in Nagaland, and people will tell me that this is all nonsense, it doesn't work. But I worked in Nagaland where the justice system is still based on that, because whatever the unique reasons why Nagaland managed to protect its structure of justice system, or village-based justice system, because of its unique history, and it works very effectively. Very few matters come to the court, except in towns. So, except in Kohima and in Dimapur, I think a lot of dispute resolution is carried out in villages very effectively. And so I think it's possible. When anyone who says it's not possible and it's just a crackpot idea, it's obviously Mahatma Ji didn't think it was a crackpot idea. And I've seen it working. If I didn't see it working, I would have possibly been off that view. But because I saw it working, I'm of the view that maybe we may need to tweak it, but it's a possible way of ensuring justice, and justice which is accessible to everyone. I can give you numerous examples of how it works in practice, especially in Nagaland. And I always tell people Nagaland is an example of the justice system in India which would have existed if there was no colonial intervention.
Absolutely. So finally, what is your message to our young lawyers and law students?
Enjoy the ride. Enjoy the ride. And it's going to be tough. Sometimes it's going to be disheartening. Sometimes it's even going to be very, very frustrating. But in the end, I believe that it has the rush of being able to make an argument which is irrefutable, or being able to convince the judge to come around to a point of view which he was initially not inclined to do to support your case, is a thrill which is unmatched. It is an adrenaline rush which I don't think can be replicated. So, but you have to enjoy the journey. If you don't enjoy the journey, then it's better right now that you move into something else.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, sir, for being
Thank
a
you.
wonderful being here, for being so supportive and giving such valuable advice to all our young lawyers. And this is the intent of this entire series, to actually showcase the journey so that they can get motivated for this profession and should not commit certain mistakes and build a successful career. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.